It is time now to connect virtually with Israel, where our last but not least honorary foreign press awardee is based. Professor Yuval Noah Harari is a historian, philosopher, and the best-selling author of *Sapiens, Homo Deus, 21 Lessons for 21st Century, and *Sapiens, A Graphic History. His books have sold over 35 million copies in 65 languages, and he is considered one of the world's most influential public intellectuals today. He is also the co-founder of Sapienship, a social impact company focused on education, entertainment. I see Thanos Dimadis, our executive director, is waiting for us to connect with Israel and find there our honorary foreign press awardee, Professor Yuval Noah Harari. Thanos, we come to you.
Yuval, thank you so much for being here with us. Congratulations of being one of our honorary foreign press awardees this year. We would like to hear, first of all, how do you feel? What message you would like to share with the foreign correspondence community in the US? And we are eager to hear your perspective.
Well, I think that the events of the recent year or 2 years have shown us the enormous importance. If anybody needed proof of the importance of good journalism, the COVID crisis provided it. It shows us what happens when we cannot trust the information that we receive from governments or from corrupted news organizations. Then it can really lead to a global catastrophe. That people don't trust the medical information they receive, they don't trust the regulations from the government, and you know, it's 2 years since the beginning of the crisis, and we still don't really know what happened in the first few crucial weeks. And as the way things look at the moment, maybe we will never know.
What do you think is the role of journalism in shaping history, in current history and in the future? How do you think that historians can use the reporting on the ground produced by working journalists to monitor and to report history? Because we are reporting the news means also that we report history that can be assessed and evaluated in the future.
You know, in ancient times, the border between historian and journalist was non-existent, really. Many of the people that we think about as the first historians, like Herodotus or Thucydides, were actually more like journalists in the way that we understand it today. I would say that the biggest difference in the end is one of perspective. That journalists, you know, they chase the news cycle of the day, maybe of the week, maybe of the year, whereas historians are the ones who take a broader perspective over decades and centuries, and sometimes, like in my case, over thousands and tens of thousands of years, and we basically work together. I mean, historians rely on the journalistic work not just to understand what's happening now, of course, but also a lot of the reports that we use to write history were created by journalists in the past, and vice versa. Journalists rely on the perspectives provided by historians to understand what's happening right now. I mean, again, we saw it during the first weeks of the pandemic, when in terms of lived experience, for many people this was something completely new. It never happened something like this in my lifetime. But then immediately you go to the history books and you read about the 1918 influenza pandemic, or you read about the waves of epidemics that killed almost 90% of the indigenous population of America after the coming of the Europeans, or you read about the Black Death. And this shapes and informs your understanding of what is happening right now. What can we expect further down the line? What is really new? And what is just the same pattern repeating itself again and again?
I don't know if you agree with me, but you know, we see today in the digital landscape of journalism, that a lot of journalists are trying to report the news, and some of them are going after who is going to get more clicks and who is going to get more viewership. Do you think that the journalists today, or your hope is that the future generation of journalists will undertake their role as the preliminary stage of assessing history, like helping historians in the future of how to assess and evaluate historical moments and events, and that it's something more serious and more important than just getting the clicks and the temporary viewership?
I would actually go for a third objective. I mean, just writing to get clicks is extremely dangerous because, you know, the truth is often complicated and painful. So if you just publish the truth, very few people will click on you. And on the other hand, I wouldn't go for trying to shape the long-term historical view of events because then you get away, you get further from your real task, which is informing people in the present about what is happening. It's a different way of approaching the material. I think we should leave history to the historians of the future. They will take care of the kind of long-term assessment of the COVID crisis. If you try to shape the views of future historians, then again, the danger is that you will kind of twist the facts, or you will twist what you consider to be the facts, so that we'll have a good impression on future historians, or that the historians will get the impressions that I want. So I hope that journalists will leave aside future historians, but also be able to overcome this desire for clicks, which is difficult, I know, because this is, in many cases, it's not just a question of, vanity, it's a question of livelihood. If you don't get the clicks, you lose the job. But the really difficult thing, and I think here historians and journalists are in the same boat, in the same predicament, that the truth is really complicated and painful, and people often just don't want to hear it. A politician that will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in his or her election campaign, in any country in the world, has an almost 100% guarantee of losing the elections. People like in Israel, they don't want to know the truth about Israel. In the US, they don't want to know the truth about the US. And even if you leave aside the question of it being painful, it's just very complicated. Like, to understand the pandemic or to understand climate change, that's extremely complicated, not because people are stupid or because people are not educated, nothing. It's just that the scientific reality of these processes is not just immensely complicated. Our brains did not really evolve to understand processes on this level. We are basically apes from East Africa, and we evolved under conditions in which we never encountered viruses, we never knew that viruses existed, and we had no real impact on the ecological system. So trying to understand how what I do influences the climate, this is not what you need to survive in the African savanna. So our brains are really programmed to be very interested in things like who in my tribe hates me, and who is in alliance with whom against a third party, so I can make these kinds of deals and things like that. And this is still the things that most fascinates us. Like, if you write gossip about a politician that hates another politician, or you write an item about a new study of how methane influences climate, everybody will click on the gossip. It's just the way that we are wired.
Do you think that the social media and the new technologies has contributed towards that direction of how the human brain works, like consuming the easy information and having resistance to go deeper and analyze more in depth?
They didn't create it, of course. It was there before, and we saw it previously in history. Fake news, conspiracy theories, all these things, they are very old news. You look at 100 years ago, and the world, like, you look at the Nazi propaganda, or Soviet propaganda. It's even worse conspiracy theories and worse fake news than what we see today. I mean, the whole of Nazi ideology is basically a one big conspiracy theory about how the Jews control the world and things like that. And so this is not new. What is new is that we now really have the technology to hack the human brain in a way which was previously impossible. You know, when Hitler gives a speech on the radio, he can't know what is the reaction of each and every individual in Germany and how to tailor his message, his words differently to different people. It's just technically impossible. Now it's feasible, not just feasible, it's happening. We are now basically being hacked. That there is a lot of talk on hacking computers and smartphones, but the really important thing that is being hacked is human beings. That with enough data about me and enough computing power, you can know what I personally hate and fear or fantasize about. And then you turn this against me, you find my weaknesses, and then you can press the hate button in my mind, the fear button in my mind. And you know, the business model of many of these platforms, it's not like they want to deliberately spread conspiracy theories and fake news. No, they want to keep you on the platform longer. And unfortunately, the easiest way to keep people on the platform longer and make them click on more things is to press the anger button in your mind. That you see the politicians you most hate in the world, and you see this kind of clickable heading. What did he do this time? I must see, I must click. And it's almost irresistible. They are using our weaknesses against us. And it's, you know, like we eat junk food. So this is junk food for the mind. It's not good for us, but it's irresistible. And I'm not against social media. I think it has done also a lot of good for humanity. It gave voice to a lot of many groups which previously were voiceless. I don't miss the 1950s when everybody agreed on the same reality, because you just had 2 or 3 networks and lots of groups had absolutely no voice at all. And also, one other thing about social media is that it released an immense flood of creativity. You know, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, many of the media giants, they believed that humans were couch potatoes. That we sit on couches and just passively consume content. And this is one of the reasons they didn't buy the new apps like YouTube when they could have done it. Because it didn't figure out, okay, we buy YouTube, who will produce all the videos? All the millions of videos? It's impossible. But what social media did, it transformed billions of people from couch potatoes into artists and producers. And that's a good thing. So we don't need to get rid of social media. We just need to improve, to have some regulations that improve the business model and bring out the best of the technology and avoid the worst.
Margin and the room for improvements in modern journalism today. What do you see as things that can be improved, that while you're watching the news or the way that journalists report from around the world and the journalist product that is produced by working journalists, what are the improvements that should be made, or you would like, you hope, you wish to see?
Journalism is a profession in its own right, and it's not my profession. I'm coming from a close field, but a different field. So I don't really know. I'm not an expert. It's not good to get advice from somebody who is not an expert. I would say something that I would like very much to see, and this is more freedom of press. In many countries around the world in recent years, after many years in which gradually there was more freedom of press and more freedom of expression, the last few years have seen really a setback as the situation in many countries deteriorates. So I hope that governments across the world support freedom of press even when it's difficult for them. Because, again, this goes back to the pandemic. You need reliable sources of information, especially in a crisis. But in a crisis, it's too late. If you suppress the freedom of the press for years, or you corrupted the press for years, and now there is a crisis, and you need reliable press, you can't just, have a genie from the bottle, okay, now we want a good press. No, you need to work on it for years so that it will be there in a time of crisis.
Today we present the scholarships for foreign journalists, young journalists pursuing master studies in the US. We present the prizes of professional excellence for foreign correspondents based on their reporting. What would you like to share as a message with these awardees today?
That journalism is one of the most important jobs in society. You serve as a kind of the nerve system of the human community, that you transmit the information, and without good journalists who not only have the freedom to write what they see, but really also have the courage to tell inconvenient truth, to tell complicated stories, we can't have a good society. And also I would like to emphasize one thing which is more from my profession. You also need to be good storytellers. That, again, many of the most important subjects in the world today, like climate change, they are inherently complicated and alien to the brain. It's objectively difficult to connect to them. So to report on these things, you also need the skill of storytelling, how to take this complicated, messy reality and turn it into a story that everybody can understand and can engage with. And this is art. So I think that an important part of being a good journalist is also to be an artist.
Thank you very much, Yuval, for addressing the Association of Foreign Press Correspondents annual award ceremony. We really appreciate your presence and your time and sharing your insights and thoughts with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.